So my name is Marie, and I'm going to talk to you about inclusive design more than you hear. And I will be signing, as you can see, because I'm deaf. That is my native sign language, Dutch sign language in this case. We have two interpreters here. They translate from spoken English to sign language, and now from sign language into spoken language. So these interpreters, I use them for various different settings, conferences like today, or work meetings with colleagues, and all kinds of other meetings. And in the Netherlands, where I'm from, we need to go through the government. So there's a provision, and for my work, 15% of the time I can use interpreters. And sometimes that is not enough. Sometimes I need more hours. So I go through the government and ask them if I can have more hours. So UWV, that is the government body that funds the interpreters, and every deaf person in the Netherlands has to do with this company, with this agency. So they interact with many deaf people, but they still send us letters like this: contact us through our telephone number. Yes, it's a bit difficult. Everybody in my, in my family of my friends around me all get this same letter. So let's talk about deafness. What does that mean? Obviously, that means that someone cannot hear, but we have kind of two perspectives on the concept. So on the left-hand side, you can see the definition, the medical perspective. So deaf with a lower cap D is used to describe or identify anyone who has a severe hearing problem. And then on the other side is deaf with a capital D, and that's the cultural perspective. So it's used by deaf people to identify themselves as culturally deaf and people who have a strong deaf identity. Okay, so the screen is still there. There are many, many causes to deafness. So here are a few. You can become deaf by meningitis, you can get ill, you can become deaf because of old age, medicine use, hearing damage. It can also be hereditary, or you can be born by a deaf, like me. And that is totally fine. It makes me who I am, and I wouldn't want it any other way. So then, sign languages. My native language is Dutch sign language, which is a sign language. Sign languages are not pantomimes or simple gestural codes based on a spoken language. They are visual-spatial languages that don't have a written form of their own. The grammar of sign languages and the syntax are different from spoken languages, and they rely heavily on facial expression to convey meaning and give emphasis. I just want to show you a clip. There's some music there. We won't have it interpreted. It's up to you to make something out of it. Just to show you how facial expressions are very important in sign language, but I assume you know the story, so you will be fine. People ask me a lot of the time, sign language is international, yeah, right, is universal, but that's not the case. Every country has their own sign language, and we also have dialects. So there is French sign language, there's Polish sign language, there's Dutch sign language. So it's important to understand that deaf people, sorry, Mr. Photographer, you're in our line of sight, sorry. So I lost my thread here. So deaf people who live in a country where, for instance, English is the spoken language, they learn English as a second language. So for the UK, that would be British Sign Language as their first language, and English as their second language. For Polish signers, that would be Polish Sign Language first, and then Polish spoken language. So deaf readers can be compared to second language readers. So deaf people, it's important to not view them as people with a disability or a handicap, but to look at them from a cultural and linguistic perspective. So the dominant language in their country is not their first language. That's something that's important to realize. Sometimes that causes problems. The hearing society, and then there's the disability community. So we kind of like fall in between them. So adaptations like screen readers or wheelchairs, physical adaptations, are something that we don't need. What we need are linguistic and cultural adaptations. So it's about communication. Just to give you an idea of how the grammar works in sign languages, there are a couple of sentences here, so it's in English, just to make it easier. Would you like to have lunch with me? That would be a normal English sentence. And if you were to sign that, it would be you, me, go lunch. And the same goes for the other sentence, the yellow ball is in the cupboard. In signs, you would point to the cupboard first and then also place the yellow ball inside it. So what we do is we use placements for reference. And what I do want to emphasize is that this grammar doesn't show that sign languages are simpler than spoken languages. They're just different. They have a different grammar, just like Polish and French have different grammars, or Dutch and Polish and French. So the deaf community is a small but very diverse community. Many deaf people have additional disabilities, so they have an extra need, special needs. So they have hearing issues or they have delays in cognitive development. The second group is the group of deaf people that have the spoken language of their country as their second language. They can communicate very well in their own language. They can express themselves 100% without any problems. But if you ask them to read something or write something, then they will get stuck. And then the top group is the bilingual group. And those are the deaf people that have the sign language, or have acquired the sign language and the spoken language of their country on an equal level. But that is a relatively small group. So I've told you about what it means to be deaf. What I would like to emphasize is that if you design for deaf people, others can benefit from it as well. So if you identify the problem, then you can recognize exclusion. And only then we can go forward to inclusive design. Like many other things, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. That just doesn't work. But I want to give you a couple of tips that you can use to improve your work and have others benefit from it as well. So firstly, what I've already said, like deaf people use sign language as their first language. So when they use a spoken language or a written language, there are a couple of tips that I wanted to give you to improve the readability of your website. So these tips are from usability.gov and a list apart. If you use these in your work, it will benefit deaf people. It will make life easier for them, but also for others. 50% of adults in the United States can't read a book written at an 8th grade level. That is a really large group. Many people drop out of formal education because of dyslexia or learning issues, poor vision, or they've never found a learning environment that matches their needs. For deaf people who have issues with reading, this percentage is even higher. It's as high as 80%. So reading takes effort. It's just a fact. So here are the tips. Firstly, use headings and subheadings. Make 1 point per paragraph. Use short sentences. There's a typo there. It should be 7 to 10 words per line. Use bulleted lists. Use easy, accessible language whenever possible. And write in a journalistic style. Make your point and then explain it. Write in an active form. Avoid unnecessary jargon and slang, because that can lead to a cognitive load. Use images, diagrams, multimedia for visual translation of your content. Chunk your content. Use white space. And then lastly, include a glossary for specialized vocabulary and provide definitions in a simpler language. So that's for themes that have very high density in information, like legal terms or medical information. An even bigger group than we just talked about is the users that, everybody reads only 20 to 28% of a page. We don't read the web as we do on paper. So we come to a website to fulfill a task, and if that doesn't work, and if we don't get there soon, we get frustrated and we skim even more and read even less. So the most important information needs to be on top. And it's not just for me as a deaf person reading your website, but it goes for everybody, really. Subtitles is a good plan. I like to read, so for me, subtitles work really well. But language, joke, wordplay, synonyms that you have in spoken language are sometimes hard to understand for deaf readers. As I said before, sign languages don't have a natural written form. So when you give someone subtitles, what you really do is that you give them a written translation of a spoken language, and that is to an audience that doesn't have a written form of their first language. So that is hard sometimes. Okay, so they're not visible here. So underneath the captions, it says tick, tack, tick, tack, tick, tack. So the goal of subtitles is to convey the content of your message. You don't have to give a verbatim translation, and it's not meant to test your audience's language knowledge either. What we also have is transcripts. They work well, but if you already have issues with reading and you need to read these long, long, long lists of texts, that's really hard too. So this is another possibility, social media or a multimedia solution. There's many local authorities in the Netherlands that do that now. So what they do is they translate written information to sign language translation, and that's being signed by a deaf native signer, and it gives full access for the deaf audience, which is a very good solution for many deaf people, but not for me really. I don't have the patience or the time to look through the whole clip to find one single bit of information. But for many, many deaf people, this is a very good solution and they appreciate it very much. This is a very good solution, but the problem is that it costs a lot of time and money because you have to shoot the clip, and if something changes in the content, you need to reshoot the whole thing again. But it's good for websites that have very dense information like taxes, insurance, or medical information. It's a solution to give full access to all of your users. This might also be an idea, so you may have a website with text that you can read, but you can give them you can put an icon in there to give people the option to look at the sign language translation. So that means that you can have a choice either to read or to watch the clip in sign language. What you could also do is have specialized glossaries, difficult words, simpler language, all these things that you can include. This is something that is very dear to my heart because this happens a lot still. Many, many websites give only a phone number, which doesn't really work for me. There's so many other options right out there right now. So there's WhatsApp, there's Skype, there's chat, there's lots of options. So why do we still only have a phone number as the only option? We can also have email. For example, if I want to go to my doctor and make an appointment, I have to go through an agency, an interpreter agency, and they will call the doctor, and then they will translate for me when we make an appointment. But it's still not, direct contact. This still happens then. Many forms when you want to order something online, you have to put down a phone number. And what then happens to me is this. This is my phone. This is a screenshot of my phone. So during 1 week, this company called me 3 or 4 days, 4 times a day. Yeah, and I just, I take it for granted because I can't do anything with this. So think about the information that you really need from your users. What is it that you want them to provide? Also, this, do not reply emails. You want to ask a question or you ask for information, you have to go through a contact form on the website, and then you get an answer by email, right? But when you want to reply to that answer, when you want to get back in touch, you still have to phone. So I have to go back to the contact form again, send a new message, and do the whole song and dance from the start. And sometimes I really can't be bothered. This would be an idea if it were up to me. So give people options. How do you want us to get in touch with you? So you can choose whatever you like, text, email, or even phone. And also, if you want to register a phone number when it's mandatory, I can understand that, but give your users a comment box where they can tell you, this is my phone number, but if you call me, it won't make sense because I will not answer the phone. This is an interesting topic. More and more notifications now have visual cues, and I've tried to find some examples of sound cues only, but unfortunately I can't find them because I can't hear them. The World Health Organization used to have a vision on a perspective on disability that they've changed. They used to say it was a personal health condition, but now the view has changed to a mismatch in human interaction, which is a good thing for me because this really says it all. I don't have a disability myself, but my surroundings make me disabled. The examples that I just gave you pose boundaries for me from society. I don't give myself these boundaries. So, mismatch. Microsoft has done some interesting research on inclusive design. So, inclusive design puts people in the center from the start of the process. We are all very diverse, and we can learn from that diversity. We design things in order for people to participate fully in real life, but also in a digital world. And these ideas and adaptations that we see with others can help us improve our designs. And if we understand why there's no access, we can go through to inclusive design. It's not about checking the boxes in order to fulfill the guidelines, but it's the process. So the process and the method have to work together. Recognize exclusion. This happens when we solve problems from our own biases. If we seek out exclusion, if we understand why it happens, we can use that to improve our ideas. Sometimes exclusion is temporary, when you break your arm and you have to do things with one hand, or you look into bright light, which means that you can't see for a while. Sometimes exclusion is situational. People adapt and navigate through different spaces, and we have amazing abilities to adapt ourselves to these environments. So when you're in a bar and it's really loud and crowded and you can't hear each other, or when you are a new parent with a baby on your arm, or even when you order food in abroad, because I don't speak Polish. I have no idea what I'm ordering from the menu. So learn from diversity. Inclusive design puts people in the center from the start. As I said before, we are amazing. We have amazing capabilities to adapt ourselves. And if we understand how people adapt themselves to their surroundings, we can use that to better our products. And we need to learn from people that have experienced exclusion. So those people are your users, and they are the experts, not you. So solve for one and then extend to many. As I said before, it's not a one-size-fits-one, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. That doesn't help. If we design one-size-fits-one with that in mind, everybody else will benefit from that as well. As an example, the subtitles that I've mentioned have been created with hard of hearing and deaf people in mind, but we use them all the time. You do too. They're on TV, but also research has shown that on Facebook, 85% of the videos are being watched without sound, and half of them are being watched to the end if they have subtitles. And they're not watched by deaf and hard of hearing people, they're watched by you, others. I just want to show you this another clip. This is about biases. There are subtitles in the clip. I'm not sure if that will go well with the captions. We'll have to look at that.
Thomas. And, this is Navid. We are inventors in the Lemelson, M.I.T. Student Prize Competition.
Access to communication is a basic fundamental human right, and every single person deserves to be a part of the global community. However, those who are deaf or mute communicate differently than everyone else. They primarily use sign language, while the rest of the world communicates verbally. This puts the deaf-mute community at a disadvantage, because like a foreigner in another country, they can't communicate like everybody else. What we decided to do is create gloves that translate sign language into text and speech. We have had extensive work with individuals in the disabled community and have seen firsthand their daily struggles. We wanted to develop something that would help the deaf and mute better communicate with the rest of the world, without changing how they already interact with each other. By simply putting on a pair of gloves, those who utilize American Sign Language can now communicate with the rest of the world the same way they communicate with each other.
The gloves work by utilizing sensors on the hand and wrist to measure hand position and hand movement. The gloves then send this data to the computer via Bluetooth for processing. Once the computer recognizes and interprets the sign, it then outputs a corresponding word or phrase in text and speech. If you were to say, "Hello, I'm well, thank you," it would look something like this.
Hello, I'm well, thank you.
And just like that, we've translated American Sign Language into spoken English instantly.
There are approximately 70 million deaf-mute people in the world who use sign language, but over 7 billion humans on the planet. Our device revolutionizes the way these two communities understand and interact with each other.
Currently, there is no commercial sign language translator on the market. With this invention, over 70 million people achieve a new level of independence. 70 million people gain access to a new job, and 70 million people secure an improved quality of life, all with the help of a pair of gloves. We believe that access and inclusiveness are catalysts for change.
These gloves were crafted with this principle in mind and seek to promote a more unified global community.
Well, okay. Every year there are a couple of researchers, students that have this revolutionary idea of these gloves that can translate sign language. I'm not really happy with this because of the word choice that they use. They say the deaf and mute, and they also say the disabled community or the disability community. And also, it just works one way. So if you remember, there's this guy that signs to this girl, and the girl then wants to answer, but she doesn't know how to. And also, they think that everybody all over the world knows American Sign Language, which is also really not the case. And it's just really not possible to translate sign language in one simple hand shape, because as I've shown you before, facial expressions are very important. So there is no technology out there yet right now to translate sign languages. When we create things from our own framework is what they did. That is what happens. So if we design things, if we create things and designs, do that with others. Ask them as testers, ask deaf people, blind people, others with all kinds of needs. Include them in your project from the start. Co-create with them. Co-design. And this was my talk. I'd like to end my talk with this quote by James Charlton: "Nothing about us without us." That's it. Okay. Thank you. Oh, hang on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mari.